"You don't need to come tonight. Mother doesn't want you here." That was the text message sent by my husband on the night of the housewarming party for my mother-in-law's new estate. I replied briefly, "Understood, darling." They had ignored and humiliated me, so I decided to make them regret it. I canceled all payments and clawed back every single cent. An hour later, they started calling me like lunatics. Zelia slowly massaged her temples. On the laptop screen in front of her, a string of numbers indicated that a massive sum had just left her account. It was the final payment for a luxurious mansion located in Tuxedo Park, one of the most exclusive residential enclaves in Atlanta. That house wasn't for her. It was for her mother-in-law, Mother Eudora. Zelia let out a long sigh, closed her laptop, and leaned back in her leather executive chair. As the CEO of a successful high-end fashion export firm, Zelia was used to making multi-million-dollar decisions. But this decision was different. There was a bitterness that wouldn't wash away. It had all started 3 months ago. Her husband, Tavarius, had come to her with a pitiful look on his face. Tavarius was a good man, or so she thought, but unfortunately, he was far too submissive to his mother's will. That night, Tavarius sat next to Zelia, took her hand, and began the persuasion tactics Zelia had heard far too many times. "Baby, Mother is getting old. She says her lifelong wish is just to live in a decent house for the years she has left." Zelia remained silent. The word decent, the standard of decent that Tavarius and Eudora spoke of, was highly relative. The home Eudora lived in now was already good enough, a spacious condo in Buckhead. But Eudora always felt she was lacking something. Eudora had never liked Zelia. To her, Zelia was just a common woman who had gotten lucky in business. Zelia's status as a mogul, far from being a source of pride, became an object of jealousy. Eudora believed that as a daughter-in-law, Zelia should entrust all her earnings to her husband and mother-in-law to manage. Naturally, Zelia refused. She had put blood, sweat, and tears into her business and wanted to use that money only for transparent purposes. But Tavarius was her weakness. "What house are we talking about, honey?" Zelia asked in that moment. "You know, the one over in Tuxedo Park." "Mother went to see it. She says the air is cleaner there, and it has a garden," Tavarius replied, avoiding Zelia's gaze. Zelia almost choked. Tuxedo Park was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Georgia. She knew the market prices there perfectly. It wasn't a simple house. It was a small palace. "Tavarius, that price is absurd. We're in the middle of a business expansion." Zelia tried to negotiate. "Please, Zelia, just this once, for my mother. I promise that after this, she will never ask you for anything else. I feel so ashamed as a son not to be able to make my mother happy just this once." Tavarius began to use his main weapon, guilt. And as always, Zelia softened. She loved Tavarius and always held on to the hope that her sacrifice would finally make Eudora accept her. Thus began the process of buying the house. Zelia took care of everything. It was she who negotiated with the luxury real estate group, she who prepared the mortgage documents in her name, and she who paid the down payment, which amounted to a considerable percentage of her personal savings. Tavarius and Eudora only showed up to sign the initial contract, take photos for social media, and choose the paint colors. Throughout the process, Zelia felt like an ATM with legs. Every time they met, Eudora didn't ask how Zelia was. The questions were always the same. "How is the house coming along? When will they finish? Why are they taking so long? Oh, Zelia, I heard the catering for the housewarming party is very expensive. You can afford it, right? Don't embarrass me in front of my friends from the club." Zelia bit her lip. The housewarming party. That was what Tavarius and Eudora had been planning all week. Tomorrow was the big day, the day they would officially unveil the new house. Ironically, Zelia, who had paid for the house in its entirety, was not allowed to participate in the party planning at all. She only received the expense reports. Every day, Tavarius sent her a list of invoices. luxury catering with Wagyu beef sliders and imported truffles, floral decorations flown in from Holland, invitations printed on high-quality cardstock for Eudora's high society friends, and Zelia had no choice but to wire the requested amounts. That night, Zelia returned to her own home, a penthouse in Midtown Atlanta. In the living room, Tavarius and Eudora were laughing and chatting while looking at fabric swatches for the service staff's uniforms for the party. Zelia had no idea who these employees were. "Ah, Zelia, you're home," greeted Tavarius with a certain awkwardness. Eudora only glanced at her sideways and went back to focusing on the fabric catalog. "Yes, honey. Are the preparations going well?" Zelia put down her briefcase, trying to smile. "Of course everything is ready. Tomorrow will be the best party in Atlanta," Tavarius exclaimed. "I'm glad," Zelia said softly. "Oh, Mother Eudora, I just paid the rest of the amount for the house. It is now completely ours." Zelia expected at least a word of thanks. Eudora's reaction was unexpected. She didn't smile. She just nodded briefly. "Ah, good. It's what you had to do," she said brusquely. "Tavarius, I think this gold is more elegant than the silver. My guests will be impressed." Zelia felt as if a dagger had been driven into her heart. It's what you had to do. So all her efforts, the millions of dollars she spent, were considered just an obligation. Tavarius saw the change in his wife's expression and tried to shift the atmosphere quickly. "Of course, Mother. Let's do it in gold. Zelia, are you tired? Go take a bath." It was Tavarius's gentle way of excluding Zelia from the conversation. Zelia nodded weakly and headed to her bedroom. She felt stupid. Why was she still expecting something? Why was she trying to buy the recognition of someone who clearly hated her? She left the bedroom door ajar while changing clothes. She needed to catch her breath before facing them again. It was then that she heard Tavarius talking on the phone. Eudora seemed to have left already, and Tavarius was speaking with her again from the living room. Tavarius's voice was low but clearly audible. "Yes, Mother, everything is sorted. Zelia just transferred the entire remaining balance," Tavarius said. There was a brief silence. Zelia could only hear Eudora's faint voice on the other end of the line. Then Tavarius laughed. "Yes, Mother, don't worry. Our plan is safe." "Good. Are you sure she made the payment today? You know what you have to do after that?" Zelia's heart seemed to stop. Our plan is safe. What you have to do? What did all this mean? The ominous feeling she had been forcefully ignoring reared its head again. She tried to convince herself she had heard wrong, that it was just paranoia. But Tavarius's tone, the conspiratorial tone full of secrets, gave her goosebumps. Right after all her money was transferred, what was this plan they were talking about? The next day was D-Day for the inauguration of Eudora's house. The party was scheduled to start at 7 o'clock p.m. Zelia woke up with mixed feelings. The phone conversation from last night between Tavarius and Eudora wouldn't leave her head. "You know what you have to do?" That phrase repeated like a broken record. She tried to ask Tavarius in the morning, but her husband left the house early. "Honey, I have to go early to help Mother with the preparations. You take care of work at the company. Don't worry about anything," Tavarius said, putting on his shoes hurriedly. "Tavarius, I'll go with you. Can I help check the catering or something?" suggested Zelia. Tavarius's steps stopped. He turned around with an indecipherable expression. "No, Zelia. There are already a lot of people there and it's chaos. You'll just get tired. You are the protagonist of this evening. Just come later, look beautiful, and that's it," he said. Then he hurriedly kissed Zelia's forehead and left. Protagonist. Zelia almost laughed bitterly. What kind of protagonist knows nothing about her own party? What kind of protagonist pays for the entire party but doesn't participate? Throughout her time at the office, Zelia couldn't concentrate on work. She looked at the party dress hanging carefully in her private office. It was a gown she had designed herself, an elegant piece of rose gold brocade with a silk shawl of the same tone. She wanted to look perfect, not for Eudora's friends, but for Tavarius. She wanted Tavarius to be proud of her. She had also prepared a very special housewarming gift, a piece of art by a famous sculptor that she had commissioned 3 months ago. At 4 p.m., Zilia decided to leave work early. She wanted to get ready calmly. On the way home, she called Tavarius. "Honey, what time will you come to pick me up? Or should I go alone? We're matching colors, right?" Tavarius's phone rang, but he didn't pick up. Zilia sent a message. The blue read check appeared, but there was no response. Zilia sighed. He must be very busy. She tried to think positively. She also called Mother Eudora, just to formally ask if anything was missing. The phone rang twice and suddenly cut off. Rejected. Zilia's heart began to beat with anxiety. Why did she reject the call? She called again, and it went straight to voicemail. She blocked me. No, impossible. Eudora is older. Maybe she pressed the wrong button by mistake. Zilia repeated that mantra in her head, knowing she was denying reality. At 6 p.m., Zilia finished showering and sat in front of her vanity. She applied light makeup, her hands trembling slightly. The bad feeling was getting stronger. She called Tavarius again. This time it went straight to voicemail, just like Eudora. Something was very wrong. Zilia sat still, looking at her reflection in the mirror. The woman in the mirror was beautiful and successful, but she looked pathetic. She was begging for the attention of people who didn't love her. She was funding the luxurious life of people who wouldn't even answer her calls. Tavarius's words from last night returned to her mind. Do you know what you have to do after that? Was this their mission? To cut Zilia out after receiving all the money? After the house was paid for? A shiver ran down her spine. No, it can't be. Tavarius loves me. At least he used to. At 6:30 p.m., the party should have already started. Zilia was still sitting in her room. The beautiful party dress was still hanging, and the expensive gift remained wrapped. She felt like the stupidest person in the world. She had gotten ready and made up for a party she had paid for, but she wasn't even sure if she was invited. She took a deep breath. She had to end this uncertainty. She needed a clear answer. She grabbed her cell phone and opened the messaging app. She wouldn't call anymore. She would send a message, forcing Tavarius to be honest. Although her heart was breaking, her manicured fingers typed without shaking. Darling, I'm ready, leaving now. She sent the message to Tavarius. Immediately, the 2 gray checks appeared. Zilia stared at the phone screen without blinking, waiting for them to turn blue. Waiting for an answer. A minute passed. 5 minutes passed. The phone in her hand felt heavy. She knew that whatever the answer was, it would change her life forever. She held her breath. Time seemed to have stopped in the luxurious master bedroom. Zilia stared at the screen. Her message seemed so innocent and pathetic under the room's light. The gray checks felt like a mockery. Tavarius had surely read it. He would have the phone in his hand, but he chose not to respond. A few more minutes passed, and Zilia's waiting transformed from nervousness to cold anxiety. She listened to the wall clock in the living room. It sounded like a hammer striking slowly. Exactly at 6:45 p.m., the phone in her hand vibrated violently. Zilia's heart jumped into her throat. She unlocked the screen with trembling fingers. It was a new message from her husband, a single sentence, a sentence that summed up all her fears, her wasted sacrifices, and all the humiliation she had received. You don't need to come tonight. Mother doesn't want you here. Zilia read the sentence once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't seem to enter her brain. They were strange, like an incomprehensible foreign language. The phone slowly slid from her hand and fell onto her lap, covered by silk pajamas. She was still sitting in front of the vanity. The mirror reflected a beautiful woman perfectly made up with empty eyes. The expensive rose gold dress hanging in the closet seemed to mock its owner's fate. The expensive art gift was on the bed, looking like a monument to stupidity. The initial shock passed in a few seconds, followed by a sharp physical pain. It was as if a giant hand were crushing her heart. It wasn't an, I'm sorry, the party is postponed. Not an, I'm sorry, mother is feeling unwell. It was a blatant, cruel, and intentional rejection. And the one who sent the message was her husband, Tavarius. He wasn't a simple messenger, he was an accomplice. Suddenly, all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. Tavarius's phone call last night. Our plan is safe. Do you know what you have to do? This was Tavarius's mission, to cleanly eliminate Zilia after all the bills were paid. The house was paid for, the party paid for. They didn't need Zilia anymore. She was just an expired ATM. Other memories flooded her mind uncontrollably. The memory of when she canceled a crucial business trip to Paris just because Eudora had a cold and wanted her daughter-in-law to take care of her. In reality, Eudora just wanted to brag to her neighbors that she could treat her successful daughter-in-law like a servant. The memory of when she covered the losses of Tavarius's completely failed coffee shop business. She used her company's emergency funds, but never heard a word of thanks from Tavarius or Eudora. On the contrary, she only heard complaints. If you were going to give money, you should have invested more. If I had more capital, I surely would have succeeded. Zilia remembered all of Eudora's sarcasms, that Zilia was too rigid and old-fashioned, that she was so obsessed with work that she forgot her duty as a woman. And most painful of all, that she was barren because she hadn't given her grandchildren yet. In reality, they had only been married for 2 years. And it was Zilia who postponed pregnancy to stabilize Tavarius's and his family's finances. During all this time, Zilia had endured it all. She swallowed it all for love of Tavarius. She always thought Tavarius was on her side, that he simply had a hard time between his wife and his mother. But this text message was proof. Tavarius wasn't having a hard time. He had chosen, and he hadn't chosen Zilia. Tears began to accumulate in her eyelids, hot, stinging, full of humiliation. She almost sobbed. She wanted to scream, throw things, cry like a madwoman. But the moment she looked at her reflection in the mirror, something different happened. The tears stopped at the edge of her eyelids. Anger, cold and clear as dry ice, began to flow through her veins. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It turned into power. She was no longer the weak woman lamenting her fate. She was Zilia, the woman who built a business empire with her own hands, the woman who negotiated with international clients, the woman who didn't fear making difficult decisions. And tonight, she would make the most difficult and simultaneously easiest decision of her life. She wasn't a victim. She was an investor who had just realized her investment was rotten. And what does a smart investor do when they know the investment is rotten? She cuts her losses. Zilia picked up the phone she had dropped. Her fingers no longer trembled. She opened Tavarius's message again. "You don't need to come tonight. Mother doesn't want you here." She read the message one last time, not with pain, but with disgust. A cold, ironic smile grazed her nude-painted lips. She looked in the mirror and said to herself in a low voice, "Fine. You started this." Her fingers danced over the screen. She wrote a short answer and sent it to Tavarius, an answer that would make them sleep in a momentary sense of victory. "Understood, darling." She sent the message. She knew Tavarius would read it and feel relieved. Good, submissive as always, Tavarius would probably think. I can go back to enjoying the party, drunk on victory. Zilia left her personal cell phone on the vanity. She wouldn't need it anymore tonight. She got up and walked decisively toward the office in the corner of the bedroom. She ignored the party dress and the gift. She sat in her comfortable executive chair, opened a drawer, and took out another phone. Her business phone. A black, solid, heavy object full of contacts of important people. The screen of the business phone lit up, showing a photo of her smiling with confidence. This was the real Zilia, the CEO Zilia, the Zilia who controlled everything. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. The air in the room felt heavy. She knew she would burn bridges in the next hour, but she also knew she had to do it to build a new palace on the ashes. Her finger touched the screen and searched for the first name on the speed dial list. The name was Mr. Sterling, Private Banking. The game had just begun. At 7:00 p.m., Celia pressed the call button. The call connected to Mr. Sterling, her private banker, who had managed her assets for the last 5 years. Sterling was a true professional. Madam CEO, good evening. It's been a while since you called outside business hours. A calm, deep voice was heard on the other end. Mr. Sterling, good evening. I'm sorry to bother you. I have several urgent requests that must be processed tonight. I hope you aren't busy. Zilia's voice was completely different from a few minutes ago. There was no trace of emotion or doubt. There was only a cold and clear instructional tone. Sterling caught the gravity. Of course, ma'am. I am ready. How can I help you first? Zilia began. Immediately cancel all direct debits and scheduled transfers from any account in my name to Tuxedo Park Realty or related accounts, effective from this very moment. HOA fees, bills, whatever. Understood? I will cancel all direct debits related to the real estate agency. Mr. Sterling could be heard typing on the computer. Anything else? Yes, this is key, continued Zilia. It concerns the final wire transfer of $2 million I made this afternoon. I know the funds have already reached the developer's account, but I want to know whose name is on the purchase agreement for that property. Sterling verified the data. According to records here, the contract holder is Mrs. Eudora, and you are listed as the total guarantor and primary payer. All funds came from your account. Perfect, said Zilia quietly. Mr. Sterling, contact the bank's legal department immediately. I want to freeze that transaction. I want to recover my funds. Find a reason. Use any reason. Fraud, coercion, or undue influence. I don't care. I want there to be problems in the property transfer process of that house. A small sigh was heard from Mr. Sterling. Ma'am, that is very complicated. The funds have already been transferred and canceling a paid contract. I know it's complicated, cut in Zilia sharply. I don't pay your salary for you to do easy things. I am a VIP client, and my priority tonight is to create a legal problem in that transaction. I will not sign any documents related to the property transfer. Put that house in bank dispute status. Do you understand me? Understood, ma'am. I will inform the legal team right now. I will take all the measures I can. Sterling's voice was very serious now. Good. Third, this is the easiest part. Permanently block all family cards linked to my main account, the ones in the name of Mr. Tavarius and Mrs. Eudora. No, not a temporary block, permanent, effective as of 10 minutes ago. That can be processed immediately. Permanent block for Tavarius and Eudora. Done, said Sterling. Do you need anything else? That is enough for now. Send me an email confirmation of all requests within an hour, Zilia said, and hung up. She didn't stop. Her hands immediately searched for the next contact. It was Mr. Carmichael, marketing director of the Tuxedo Park Real Estate Group. Zilia had met with him a couple of times. Hello, Mr. Carmichael. Good evening. This is Zilia, the buyer of the estate on Tuxedo Road. Zilia's voice changed now to a slightly panicked tone, but still controlled. Ah, Mrs. Zilia, good evening. What's wrong? Is the party going well? Greeted Carmichael cheerfully. The party? Zilia let out a small, dry laugh. Mr. Carmichael, I'm calling you because a very serious problem has arisen. I am the guarantor and total payer of the property, right? Yes, of course, ma'am. 100% are your funds. Good. I have just received information that I have been scammed by my husband and my mother-in-law. They conspired to appropriate that asset. What, ma'am? What are you saying? Carmichael's voice rose. I don't have time to explain it. But what is clear is that I, as the legitimate payer, have never given my consent for any property transfer. I am officially informing you. I am going to recover all funds, and I am going to file a dispute over that home. I made the transfer this afternoon under duress. Zilia lied, mixing a little drama to make the message stick. But ma'am, the money is already paid, and the party is underway. Exactly, Mr. Carmichael. Send your team there right now. Stop the party and seal the house. That house is now in dispute. I will not sign any papers. If the developer hands the keys to Mother Eudora, I will sue your company for complicity in fraud. Yes, ma'am, calm down. I will send our security team and legal team to the location immediately. We will freeze the status of the home. Carmichael was in a total panic. A lawsuit from a multimillionaire buyer was his nightmare. Good. I await your call. Zilia hung up. 2 triggers pulled. Bank and real estate. Now the third. She called the head of operations at her own company. Langston, sorry to call you at night. Prepare the executive benefit recovery documents for Director Tavarius. The black Cadillac Escalade, license plate 1234KK. It is in the company's name, right? Yes, boss. It is the vehicle provided to your husband, Langston replied, puzzled. No, not anymore. Starting tomorrow morning, initiate the repossession of that vehicle. At 9 o'clock a.m., send someone to pick up the car wherever it is and freeze the payroll account in his name. He is no longer an employee of our company, said Zelia. Tavarius held the title of marketing director at Zelia's company, but it was just a gift. His work performance was close to zero. Understood, boss. I'll do it immediately. Zelia put down the business phone. Finished. 3 calls. Total time, 45 minutes. In 45 minutes, she had destroyed the foundations of the luxurious life Tavarius and Eudora were about to enjoy. She got up and left the office. She took off her pajamas, walked to the bathroom, and filled the tub with hot water. She poured in lavender-scented bath salts. She needed to rest. While she submerged herself in the hot water, exactly at 8:10 p.m., the personal cell phone she had left on the vanity began to scream. The screen shone brightly. Call from husband. The call rang for a long time and cut off. A second later, it lit up again. Call from mother-in-law. Cut off. Call from husband. 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 The phone vibrated violently on the glass table, emitting a hum in the room. The calls came incessantly, in a state of panic, full of anger. Zelia closed her eyes and rested her head on the edge of the tub. She smiled slightly. She didn't touch that phone. Let them panic. This was just the beginning. She inhaled the lavender scent deeply. Tonight, she would sleep peacefully. 8 o'clock p.m. At Mother Eudora's new house, the party was at its peak. The house was full of light. The newly installed crystal chandeliers shone, reflecting light on the imported marble floor. Decorations of lilies and white roses filled every corner, spreading a soft fragrance. Classical music played in the background, accompanying the light laughter of the guests and the sound of champagne glasses clinking. Mother Eudora was the star of the night. She wore a custom-made dress full of sparkling sequins and an intricate hairstyle. Her face, covered in thick makeup, shone with triumph. She was standing in the middle of her high society friends, women from the church board and elite social clubs. Everyone praised her. Mother Eudora, is this a house or a palace? It is truly impressive, exclaimed a woman with arms full of gold bracelets. Oh, it's not that big of a deal, Eudora replied, feigning modesty while waving her hand to show off her new diamond ring. It's all thanks to my Tavarius. He is a son who knows very well how to please his mother. Tavarius is truly an exemplary son, and how lucky he is to have gotten a wife like Zelia. They say her business is very big, right? Another intervened. Upon hearing Zelia's name, Eudora's face hardened for a moment, but she quickly changed her expression to a forced smile. Ah, Zelia, yes, she works a lot, she said with a nuance implying that working hard was something shameful. But of course, Tavarius is the one who runs everything. Without Tavarius, Zelia would be nothing. My Tavarius is very smart. Tavarius, who was nearby, smiled with pride. He felt like a king. He had achieved it. He had fulfilled his mother's greatest dream. He had proven to be a successful son. He looked at his wristwatch. It had been almost an hour since he sent the last message to Zelia. His wife's response, understood, had reassured him greatly. Zelia was submissive as always. Now he could enjoy this party without interruptions. He felt he had everything successfully under control, both his capricious mother and his rich wife. Just at that moment, the catering manager, Mr. Boudreau, approached him with a tablet and a somewhat rigid smile. Mr. Tavarius, good evening. Excuse the interruption. According to the contract, the remaining 50% of the catering must be paid during tonight's event. Ah, of course, said Tavarius calmly. It was expected. He took a platinum credit card out of his wallet. It was a family card with an unlimited limit that Zelia had given him. Charge it here. Mr. Boudreau took the card and swiped it through the portable terminal. A few seconds later, he frowned. I'm sorry, sir. It has been declined. Tavarius's smile trembled a little. What? Declined? Impossible. Try again. It must be bad reception. Mr. Boudreau tried again. It's still declined, sir. It says transaction rejected. Quiet murmurs began to be heard around them. Some guests standing nearby saw the scene by chance, and Tavarius's face began to burn. I have another card, he said a bit nervously. He took out a black metal card that looked very exclusive. It was also a family card from Zilia. He handed it to Mr. Boudreau. This one will work for sure. Mr. Boudreau swiped the card. The result was the same. This one is also declined, Mr. Tavarius. It says, card permanently blocked. It is cancelled. Tavarius almost shouted. What do you mean blocked? That can't be. He started to panic. Shame was spreading through his entire body. He could feel the guests' gazes fixed on him. I'm sorry. Mr. Boudreau's voice was now firmer and colder. His polite smile disappeared. The total amount is $30,000. Our company rules are strict. If payment is not completed, we must stop service. Stop service? The party is underway, snapped Tavarius. We will stop serving drinks and the chefs will stop preparing the main courses. And if it isn't resolved in 30 minutes, we will begin to remove the buffet. Are you crazy? Tavarius was truly in a state of panic. Mother Eudora noticed the commotion and walked over. Tavarius, what's wrong? Why does Mr. Boudreau look angry? Eudora's voice remained arrogant. There is a problem with the credit cards, ma'am, said Mr. Boudreau directly, showing no more respect. The catering cost has not yet been paid. Eudora's eyes widened. What, Tavarius? Why hasn't it been paid yet? Where is your wife? Why hasn't she taken care of this? Just at that moment, the second chaos arrived. The classical music stopped suddenly. All the guests turned toward the entrance. There stood 3 men in black suits. They weren't guests. Their faces were serious and tense. The one in the center, who seemed to have the most authority, was Mr. Carmichael from the real estate group, whom Tavarius also knew. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We are sorry to interrupt the party. Mr. Carmichael's voice rang loud and clear in the suddenly silent space. I am Director Carmichael of Tuxedo Park Realty. I am looking for Mrs. Eudora and Mr. Tavarius. All eyes turned now to Tavarius and Eudora. The two seemed to be under spotlights on a stage. What? What is happening, Mr. Carmichael? Asked Tavarius. His voice was shaking. A very serious administrative problem has arisen, said Carmichael, approaching. He no longer cared about party etiquette. We have just received a notification from the bank and our legal team. Mrs. Zilia, primary payer and total guarantor of this home, has withdrawn her consent for this transaction. What? Screamed Eudora. Withdrawn consent? What does that mean? This house is paid for. My son's wife paid for everything. That is the problem, ma'am. Carmichael's voice was cold. She paid, and she has filed the dispute. Mrs. Zilia alleges circumstances of fraud and coercion. As the legitimate payer, she never consented to hand over the keys to you. The funds transferred this afternoon have been frozen by the bank at her request. Legally, this house is currently in dispute. Silence. It was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in a guest's glass. Dispute. Eudora's face turned pale as a corpse. What should we do? Asked a guest, breaking the silence. This party is over, said Carmichael firmly. For legal security, we ask all guests to leave the premises immediately. This house will be temporarily sealed by us until the legal situation is clarified. Chaos erupted. The guests, those high society ladies, didn't need to be told twice. They hurried out murmuring. Some even laughed blatantly. The best party had turned into hell in an instant. This can't be, shouted Tavarius. He took out his cell phone. He had to call Zilia. He dialed his wife's number with trembling hands. The phone rang. No answer. He called again. No answer. Answer, Zilia! Answer! Shouted Tavarius desperately. Eudora, seeing Tavarius in panic, took out her own phone. "I'll call her. Surely she is afraid of me." Eudora called. Rejected. She called again. Voicemail. She called again. In the silent bathroom, amidst the lavender scent, Zelia watched the screen of the phone vibrating violently on the vanity. Call from husband. Call from mother-in-law. Call from husband. The phone screamed ceaselessly. Zelia simply smiled, closed her eyes, and enjoyed the hot water enveloping her body. The chaos in the disputed house was progressing rapidly. The high society friends who praised Eudora to the skies were now scattering like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Their faces full of fake smiles now showed a mixture of surprise, pity, and above all, malicious glee. The hottest gossip of the year was unfolding before their eyes. "My lord, having the house sealed like that? What a shame," whispered a lady to her friend as they walked quickly toward their car. "I knew they didn't have the capacity to buy a house like that. Surely the daughter-in-law bought it and now she's gotten angry. They deserve it," replied another, hurriedly taking photos of the front of the house, where the developer's security team was starting to arrive. Eudora stood frozen on the marble terrace that minutes ago was her stage of victory. She was shaking violently, but not from cold. It was from anger and unbearable shame. Her shiny dress now looked like a clown costume. The thick makeup on her face was starting to run from cold sweat. "Tavarius! Why isn't she picking up the phone?" screamed Eudora hysterically. She looked at Tavarius with wide eyes. "This is all your fault. Why did you send her that message? Why did you tell her not to come?" Tavarius, who was repeatedly pressing the call button, froze. His mother's confession in front of the developer's team and the remaining catering staff was a fatal mistake. Mr. Carmichael from the real estate agency arched an eyebrow. "Ah, so you intentionally prevented the paying party from attending her own event. This further supports Mrs. Zelia's allegations." "You don't care," shouted Eudora. She turned back to Tavarius. "Keep calling. Tell her to come here. Tell her to tell these people it's all a misunderstanding. Hurry." "I'm trying, Mother. She's not answering," replied Tavarius. He was also ashamed, but the panic was greater. He didn't know what to do. While mother and son argued, Mr. Boudreau from the catering gave a signal to his team. "Pack it up." His order was brief. The waiters who until a moment ago were serving food agilely now moved with more speed. They started stacking dirty plates roughly. Wagyu sliders, grilled shrimp, salmon. The buffet food that hadn't even been touched was immediately covered and taken out on carts. They tore down all the floral decorations they had installed. The waiters dismantled the coffee machine and recovered all the bottles. They worked quickly and efficiently, like a team of professional thieves. "Hey, what are you doing?" shouted Eudora. "You can't take that food." "That is no longer paid for, ma'am," replied Mr. Boudreau cynically. "Since the payment has been declined according to the contract, we are reclaiming everything that is our property. In case of non-payment, all goods, including intact food, revert to us." Some waiters even removed the tablecloths, leaving only the bare wooden tables. The luxurious party now looked like a place recently looted. Eudora's shame reached the limit. She had to watch them strip the remains of her splendor before her eyes. After the catering left, it was the developer team's turn. Mr. Carmichael took out a roll of large yellow stickers. "Mr. Tavarius, Mrs. Eudora, we are very sorry for this, but we ask you to leave this property." "What? Are you kicking us out? This is our house," howled Eudora. "Not anymore, ma'am. Until this dispute is resolved, this is a developer property seized by the bank. If you have important personal items, grab them. I give you 5 minutes," said a huge security guard accompanying Carmichael. 5 minutes. Tavarius and Eudora had nothing there, apart from their shattered pride. The two walked down the terrace stairs stumbling, dressed in their most expensive party clothes. Behind them, the security team pasted a large yellow sticker on the majestic wooden door. "Access prohibited due to legal dispute." And the guard put an additional padlock on the main door. Eudora and Tavarius were now standing on the street, outside the gate of their dream house. The garden lights were still on, ironically illuminating their pale and defeated faces. The cars of the last guests buzzed past. The passengers didn't even wave, as if they were bothered. This is a dream, Tavarius. It's a dream, right? Whispered Eudora. Her legs failed her, and she sat on the dusty curb. Her expensive dress got dirty. Tavarius didn't answer. He kept looking at his cell phone. Dozens of missed calls. Dozens of messages with only the gray check. He typed new panic messages over and over again. Zilia, pick up the phone. Zilia, answer now. Mother is going to faint because of you. What do you mean you blocked the cards? Are you crazy? You have made fools of me and Mother. I told you to answer. The continuous messages were sent without reply. Tavarius wanted to throw the phone into the road. He was desperate, furious, and scared. In her apartment, Zilia finally came out of the bathroom. She was wearing comfortable cotton pajamas. Her hair was wrapped in a towel. She picked up her personal phone that was still vibrating. She saw Tavarius's angry and panicked messages. She read all those messages with a calm expression, and her elegant fingers wrote a response. She didn't answer the avalanche of questions from Tavarius. She just wrote a simple sentence, direct and piercing precisely through the heart of his arrogance. Is something wrong, darling? You told me Mother didn't want me to be there. The message was sent. 2 blue checks. In front of the sealed house, on the dark sidewalk, Tavarius's phone rang. It was Zilia's reply. Tavarius opened it hurriedly. Eudora, seeing a faint hope, also tilted her head. They read that sentence together. Is something wrong, darling? You told me Mother didn't want me to be there. Silence. In that moment, Tavarius and Eudora realized this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a bank system error. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was revenge. Zilia knew. She knew everything, and she had planned all of this. Tavarius's face changed from panic to terror. Eudora's face changed from anger to pure fear. They had just realized. They hadn't insulted a submissive daughter-in-law. They had woken a sleeping dragon. The street outside the luxurious Tuxedo Park subdivision was cold and silent, very different from the splendor of the party they had just experienced. Eudora and Tavarius were now literally on the street. After being humiliated and expelled, they stood on the curb like 2 beggars in expensive clothes. The Ubers they tried to hail passed by several times. They probably didn't want to pick up passengers in the place where there had just been a commotion. Finally, after enduring the shame for almost 30 minutes, a car stopped to pick them up. The interior of the car was full of a suffocating silence. Tavarius sat in the front seat. His fingers tapped on the phone keyboard relentlessly, sending angry messages without response. Eudora sat in the back, leaning against the window. Her pale face was now deformed by repressed anger. Her luxurious dress itched on her sweat-dampened skin. The driver glanced at them sideways in the rearview mirror, sensing the tension, but kept quiet. "Where are we going?" asked the driver quietly as they approached the highway entrance. Tavarius remained silent. He didn't know what to answer. Should they go back to that small old house his mother always complained about, or to Zilia's apartment, that luxury penthouse in Midtown? "To Peachtree Street," whispered Eudora from the back seat. Her voice was hoarse. "We have to see that woman. We have to make her cancel all this." Tavarius nodded. "To Peachtree Street, please," he told the driver. He had to talk to Zilia. This surely was just a bluff. Zilia loved him. Surely he could change Zilia's mind again. If he got a little angry and begged a little, Zilia would go back to being the submissive wife he knew. When they arrived at the lobby of her luxury apartment building, Tavarius encountered the first problem. He swiped the access card at the lobby door. A red light turned on. Failure. He tried again. Failure. Access denied. Tavarius cursed under his breath. "Now what?" shouted Eudora. "The card isn't working," growled Tavarius. "Mr. Tavarius." A lobby security guard approached them. "I'm sorry, but at the owner's request the use of your card has been suspended." "Owner? I am her husband." Tavarius began to explode emotionally. "I'm sorry. Rules are rules. We must contact Mrs. Zilia's unit first to obtain permission for your entry," said the guard firmly but politely. Eudora's face turned red as a tomato, expelled from her new house, and now she had to ask permission like a guest to enter the apartment she considered her son's. This was a new layer of unbearable humiliation. The guard called on the intercom. "Good evening, Ms. Zelia. Security. Mr. Tavarius and Mrs. Eudora are in the lobby. Can I let them up?" There was a brief silence. Tavarius held his breath. If Zelia rejected them in the lobby, his life was over. Zelia's calm voice was heard over the intercom. "Let them up. I'm waiting for them." Tavarius felt a little relieved. "You see? She's waiting for me," he told the guard, and dragged his mother by the arm toward the elevator. The elevator seemed to move too slowly. Tavarius straightened his wrinkled shirt. Eudora fixed her crooked hair. They were preparing for war. Ding! The elevator door opened on the penthouse floor. Tavarius didn't need to knock. He saw the house door was ajar. He pushed the door roughly. "Zelia, what does all this mean?" he shouted as he entered. The scene inside the apartment left him stunned. Zelia wasn't crying, nor scared, nor in panic. She was sitting comfortably on the living room sofa in cotton pajamas with wet hair wrapped in a towel. In front of her on the coffee table was a steaming cup of ginger tea. She looked calm and fresh, as if she had just enjoyed a home spa. A brutal contrast to Tavarius and Eudora, who were dirty, exhausted, and full of anger. "Sit down," said Zelia softly. Her voice was calm like pond water. "Sit down?" Eudora took a step forward, shouting, "You make us go through that shame and tell us to sit down? Do you know what you have done?" "Look, Zelia, I don't know what game you're playing, but this has gone too far," intervened Tavarius. His voice trembled between anger and fear. "You humiliated us in front of everyone. You canceled my cards. You sealed Mother's house. Are you crazy?" Zelia stared at Tavarius. She searched in her husband's eyes for some trace of the man she once loved. She couldn't find anything, only fear and selfishness. "Crazy." Zelia finally opened her mouth. Her voice didn't rise, but it was sharp. "Who is crazy? Me, who worked to the bone to buy the house of your dreams, or you, who enjoy my money while insulting me behind my back?" Tavarius remained silent. "That I humiliated you?" Zelia let out a small laugh without humor. "Didn't Mother herself say she didn't want me to go? I just followed orders. I didn't go. I simply recovered everything that is my property." "Your property!" shouted Eudora. "Nothing here is yours. Everything you have is thanks to my son Tavarius. Without my son, you would be nothing. All your assets are also my son's assets." Her son's assets. Zelia looked now at her mother-in-law. The slight smile disappeared, replaced by a cold look Tavarius had never seen. "Let's talk facts, mother-in-law. I founded this company 6 years before I married Tavarius. I bought this apartment in cash 2 years before I met Tavarius. The cars in the garage are all in my company's name, and that luxurious house you bragged about so much was paid 100% with money from my personal account. So tell me exactly, where are your son's assets?" Eudora was left open-mouthed. She couldn't answer. "Zelia, stop talking nonsense." Tavarius tried to take control of the conversation. His tone softened a bit, trying the pleading strategy. Okay, I was wrong. I apologize for sending that text. Mother made me do it. You know how she is. But we didn't need to get to this. Honey, cancel all this. Call the bank, call the developer. Say it was a misunderstanding. We can still fix it." Zelia looked at him. "Fix it? There is nothing to fix, Tavarius. That text message wasn't a mistake. It was the truth. The truth that finally opened my eyes." She stood up from her seat. "I'm done," she said calmly. "Done? What do you mean?" asked Tavarius. A bad feeling invaded him. Zelia walked toward the door. Next to it were 2 large suitcases and a travel bag. They were suitcases Tavarius recognized as his own. "This marriage is over, and my role as your ATM is too," said Zelia. She kicked the suitcases gently toward Tavarius. "Those are your things. I packed everything I could. Expensive clothes, watch collection, Shoes. Tavarius's eyes widened in terror. Are you kicking me out? I'm not kicking you out, corrected Zilia. I'm just returning you to where you belong. This is my apartment. I bought it with my blood and sweat, and I don't want to breathe the same air as someone who insults me and conspires with his mother to cheat me. Con artists. Watch what you say, Zilia, shouted Eudora. You enjoyed my money, but told me not to go to the party I paid for. If that isn't a scam, what is? Replied Zilia sharply. Now please, get out, both of you. Zilia, don't do this. Tavarius was truly scared. He tried to take Zilia's hand. Zilia pulled her hand away as if she had touched fire. Don't touch me. For the first time, she raised her voice. I have ordered your car to be repossessed, and they will take it tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. The credit cards are already blocked, and tomorrow morning my lawyer will send you the divorce papers. No. Tavarius shook his head in disbelief. Ah, and one more thing. Zilia smiled cynically. Live comfortably in your new house. Which one was it? Ah, the one that is still sealed. She opened the apartment door wide, pointing to the exit. Out, she ordered. Eudora, seeing Tavarius frozen by shock, tried to move forward to push Zilia. You can't do this to my son. Zilia grabbed Eudora's hand with surprising strength. Don't you try to touch me in my own house again, mother-in-law, growled Zilia. Her eyes spit fire. If you don't leave right now, I will call security to drag you out. Seeing Zilia's look, Eudora got scared. She took a step back. Tavarius dragged his suitcases with trembling hands. He looked at Zilia one last time, seeking mercy. What he found was a steel wall. He and his mother left the penthouse. The moment they crossed the threshold, Zilia said, Goodbye, Mr. Tavarius. Goodbye, Mother Eudora. And the door closed. The sound of the double lock turning from inside was heard. Click, clack. Tavarius and Eudora were standing in the cold, luxurious hallway. Next to the pile of suitcases, they were now officially homeless. Tavarius hit the hallway wall in frustration. Ah, Zilia, open up! We can still talk, Zilia! There was no answer, only silence. That night was the longest in Tavarius and Eudora's lives. They had nowhere to go. Eudora's old house on the outskirts of the city, a duplex in East Point, seemed like the most shameful option, but they had no other. Go to a hotel? With what card would they pay? All of Tavarius's cards were blocked. The cash in his wallet was barely enough to pay the Uber there. Finally, they arrived at the old house past midnight. The house, which had been empty for weeks, smelled stale and was full of dust. Eudora, still wearing her party dress, exploded in anger. This is all your fault, Tavarius. If you had been firmer, if you hadn't depended so much on that woman's money. Eudora blamed her son, forgetting that she was the source of all the material demands. It was you who told me to send that message, replied Tavarius, not holding back. It was you who said you didn't want to see her face at the party. They argued violently in the middle of the dusty living room, surrounded ironically by Tavarius's expensive suitcases. That night they slept in narrow rooms with broken hearts and full of mutual resentment. The next morning, reality hit them harder. Tavarius woke up to the sound of his cell phone. It wasn't a call. It was the alarm. 9:02 a.m. In that moment, he remembered something. The car. He ran out. Sure enough, in front of his mother's small building stood his white Cadillac Escalade, Zilia's company car. Two burly men got out. Tavarius tried to shout, but he saw the car was already parked outside the house fence. The man simply approached him. Mr. Tavarius, we are the asset recovery team for the company. Director Zilia has ordered the repossession of this vehicle, said a man showing the work order. Tavarius couldn't do anything. He could only hand over the keys docilely. He watched as the luxury car he drove with pride drove away, driven by someone else. Now he really had nothing. The blow didn't end there. Around 11:00 a.m., while Tavarius and Eudora ate a miserable breakfast of coffee and stale bread, a motorcycle courier stopped in front of the house. Documents for Mr. Tavarius and Mrs. Eudora. Tavarius went out reluctantly. The courier handed him two thick brown envelopes, one for him, one for his mother. Eudora took the envelope suspiciously, tore it roughly. Upon seeing the logo at the top of the letter inside, her eyes widened. Tuxedo Park Realty, she read in a low voice. It was an official notification. It informed of the cancellation of the purchase contract due to the dispute filed by Mrs. Zilia and the rejection of payment. It said that a large part of the deposit already paid would be lost as a penalty and costs for damages for the canceled party. The house is gone," whispered Eudora weakly. Her body swayed. If she hadn't held on to the doorframe, she would have fallen. Tavarius didn't hear her. He was distracted with his own envelope. The envelope was thicker. It had the logo of a famous Atlanta law firm. Upon opening it, his heart beat like crazy. "Divorce complaint." The words jumped out. Tavarius read page by page with trembling hands. It wasn't a simple divorce. It was a lawsuit for division of assets, but Zilia and her lawyer had prepared it very thoroughly. The lawsuit was detailed with clarity. Zilia requested the divorce based on unfair treatment, fraud, and financial exploitation by the husband and his family. The most terrible part was the annexes. There were dozens of pages, copies of bank statements showing the flow of millions of dollars from Zilia's account to Tavarius's and Eudora's accounts, transfer receipts for the house payment receipts for all catering and decoration expenses, copies of the property deeds for the apartment and company assets bought long before the marriage. And the claim was clear. Zilia demanded a strict separation of assets. All her separate property was untouchable. As for the marital assets, which were almost nil since Tavarius had no income, Zilia said she was willing to divide them. But the most devastating thing was that Zilia demanded Tavarius return all company benefits he had enjoyed, considering them as personal debt. Tavarius sat on the floor of the dirty porch. Finished. He was completely finished. Zilia wasn't just divorcing him, she was destroying him financially to the root. "Tavarius, what does your letter say?" asked Eudora urgently, seeing her son's pale face. Tavarius handed her the papers without a word. Eudora read. She didn't understand all the legal terms, but she understood the words divorce complaint and claim for damages. The anger that had been extinguished for a moment exploded again inside Eudora, but she knew that getting angry wouldn't solve the problem. She had to change tactics. Her cunning began to work. "No," whispered Eudora. She narrowed her eyes. "She can't do this. She still loves you, Tavarius. She's just angry." "Angry? She is ruining us, Mother." "Then we have to make her anger pass," said Eudora. A grotesque idea formed in her head. "We have to ask for forgiveness. We have to soften her heart again. Mama will kneel before her. I will cry in front of her. She is a good girl. She won't be able to bear seeing her mother-in-law kneeling." Tavarius looked at his mother. He knew exactly what she was planning. It wasn't a sincere apology. It was theater. But they had no other choice. That afternoon, the two went by Uber to Zilia's company, dressed in humble clothes. Eudora even messed up her hair on purpose to look more pathetic. They arrived at the majestic lobby of the fashion company. Seeing the pitiful appearance of Tavarius and Eudora, the reception staff stopped them immediately. "Who are you looking for?" "We came to see Director Zilia. I am her husband, Tavarius." "Director Zilia is in a meeting, but your names are already on the list," said the receptionist, looking at the computer screen. "Mr. Tavarius and Mrs. Eudora are on the restricted access list, so you cannot enter the company." "What?" Tavarius hit the reception counter. Just at that moment, the elevator door opened with a ding. Zilia came out accompanied by two executives. She was wearing a navy blue suit that gave her an imposing look. Her face looked fresh and focused, as if last night weighed nothing on her. She was laughing slightly while talking about something with the executives. Seeing Zilia, Eudora ran immediately and began her performance. "Zilia, my daughter!" Eudora threw herself on the floor on her knees, trying to grab Zilia's legs. "I was wrong, daughter! I was wrong!" Eudora screamed, crying, attracting the stares of the entire lobby. Employees passing by stopped immediately to whisper, "I am a sinner. I was crazy. Don't divorce Tavarius, daughter. He is having a very hard time. Look at us. We are so miserable. Please forgive me." Tavarius stood behind her, putting on the saddest and most convincing face he could. Zelia stopped. Her smile disappeared. She looked down at the person wallowing at her feet, looked at Eudora, and looked at Tavarius. There wasn't an ounce of compassion in her eyes, only deep disgust. She sighed and said to the executive, "Langston, call security, please." "Zelia, it's me, it's Mama!" screamed Eudora louder. Zelia leaned down a little, but not to lift Eudora. She looked directly into her mother-in-law's eyes full of fake tears. "You are not my mother," said Zelia softly, but her voice was heard clearly in the silent lobby. "My mother taught me about dignity and honesty. You just wanted my money." Zelia straightened up and said, "This cheap theater is over." 2 security guards approached quickly. "What's wrong, boss?" "Get these 2 people out of the building, please." Zelia's voice returned to normal and professional. "Make sure they never set foot in my company building again. Never." "Understood, boss." The guards grabbed Eudora's and Tavarius's arms. "No, let me go. Zelia, God will punish you, you ungrateful wretch." Suddenly, Eudora's crying ceased, and her face transformed into a mask of terrible anger. Her theater was discovered in an instant. She kicked and hurled insults. Tavarius had no choice but to follow docilely while they dragged him. He looked at Zelia, who didn't even turn around. Zelia simply fixed her clothes, turned around, and headed back to the elevator, continuing her conversation with the executive as if nothing had happened. While they dragged Eudora through the glass doors of the lobby, she shouted for the last time, "You will regret it, Zelia. You will grow old and be alone." The glass doors closed, blocking her voice. Zelia, inside the elevator, just smiled slightly. She had already overcome regret. Now she was entering the field of freedom. The following months were hell for Tavarius and Eudora. After being humiliatingly expelled from Zelia's company, they returned to the narrow house in East Point. That house, which they once abandoned with arrogance for the house of their dreams, now felt like a suffocating and miserable prison. The failed party, the sealed house, and the humiliating story of Eudora being expelled from the lobby of Zelia's company spread faster than fire. Eudora's high society friends not only moved away from her, but actively turned her into the laughingstock of all gatherings. "Eudora? Oh, the one with the dispute? Ha 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 ha. I heard she lives in a dump again. What a pity. That's why you shouldn't be arrogant, especially with the daughter-in-law's money." Eudora, who lived for social recognition, collapsed completely. She locked herself in her room for days. She refused to eat. She didn't leave the house for shame of meeting the neighbors. The stress, shame, and irregular eating habits caused her health to deteriorate quickly. Her hypertension reappeared, and her diabetes worsened. The woman who once adorned herself with shiny dresses now lay in a creaking bed in old pajamas, lamenting her fate. Meanwhile, Tavarius tried to find a way out. His savings, which were actually remnants of the money Zelia gave him, disappeared quickly in living expenses. He had to get a job. But what could he do? The title of marketing director at Zelia's company was just a facade. He had never really worked. He had no real skills. Tavarius sent fake resumes with his director experience to several companies. He got some interviews, but they all ended in failure. Experienced interviewers quickly realized that the man in front of them was empty. "Mr. Tavarius, your resume says you increased exports by 200%. Could you explain what specific strategy you used? How did you analyze the European market?" asked the HR director of one company. Tavarius stammered. Sure. Working hard and watching trends. Yes, I saw trends on the internet." The interviewer just smiled slightly and closed the folder. "Understood, Mr. Tavarius. We'll call you." "We'll call you" was the universal code for you're rejected. After dozens of rejections, Tavarius began to despair. He had no choice but to lower the bar. From director to manager, rejected. To section head, rejected. To entry-level employee, rejected. Finally, with tremendous shame, he had to do whatever he could get. He started driving for Uber with a rented car whose daily fee choked him. The luxurious life he enjoyed, high-end cars, expensive watches, meals in luxury restaurants, now seemed like a distant dream. His reality was sitting in a rented car that smelled of tobacco for hours waiting for a ride, often returning home earning barely enough for gas and a meal. The narrow house became an eternal battlefield. The sick Eudora became increasingly demanding and irritable. Tavarius, exhausted physically and mentally, also exploded easily. "Tavarius, where is the money? I've run out of pills. What kind of job do you do? You can't even earn enough for your mother's medicine," shouted Eudora from the bedroom. "Money, money, money. Do you think it's easy to make money?" replied Tavarius, throwing the car keys on the table. "I drive from dawn to dawn, and this is it. Barely enough for rice and a fried egg." "When Zelia was here, you weren't like this. Then you were a good son," said. Upon hearing Zelia's name, the veins in Tavarius's neck swelled. "Enough, mother, enough. Whose fault is it that all this happened? It's your fault, for your vanity. If you hadn't been so greedy, if you hadn't insulted Zelia, we wouldn't be like this. Now you blame your mother? You are the one who didn't know how to be a husband. You are the one who didn't know how to control his wife. Stupid, Tavarius, stupid." Those fights became their daily routine. They blamed and cursed each other. There was no love left between mother and son. Only hate and late regret remained. They were trapped together in the poverty trap they themselves had created. To survive, they started selling the things left in the house. Old furniture, the imitation jewelry Eudora once bragged about. Everything was sold at bargain prices. The divorce process between Tavarius and Zelia was quick. Zelia asked for nothing more than her rights, and since all assets were originally hers, Tavarius ended the marriage with nothing more than his pile of suitcases and a mountain of debt related to the company benefits Zelia's lawyer claimed from him. One afternoon, after earning a pittance driving passengers all day, Tavarius stopped the rental car on the side of the road. He was tired and hungry. He opened his phone to look at social media and distract himself a little. Just then, he saw a post from a famous news account. It was a video of an interview. A face he knew too well appeared on the small phone screen. It was Zelia. Zelia looked very different. She looked more radiant. Her clothes and bearing seemed even more elegant. She was being interviewed on a famous business program. "Director Zelia, congratulations. We heard you recently signed the biggest export contract of the year with a famous Milan fashion brand," asked the host. Zelia on the screen smiled. A calm and confident smile. "Thank you. It is all thanks to my team's effort. We recently launched a new fashion line using eco-friendly recycled materials, and the response from the European market has been very good. You are a role model who is successful in business and looks very happy. What is your secret? As you know, you recently went through a difficult time in your private life." Zelia laughed slightly. "Difficult time? I don't see it that way. I think it was a cleansing process. Sometimes, for a room to be clean and fresh again, you have to take out the trash. My secret is simple. I focus on what I can control and let go of what is a burden." Tavarius turned off the phone screen with trembling hands. Take out the trash, let go of the burden. That was him. He and his mother were trash in Zelia's eyes. He hit the steering wheel of the car. He wasn't angry with Zelia. For the first time, he was angry with himself, angry at his own stupidity. He saw what he had lost. He had a diamond, but he threw it away to chase a grandiose and empty house. And now he had nothing. Meanwhile, Zelia was giving an interview in an air-conditioned TV studio, and ex-director Tavarius was sitting alone in a hot rental car with an empty stomach and a shattered heart. Karma had fulfilled its mission perfectly. A year had passed since that disastrous inauguration night. For Tavarius and Eudora, it was a year of pain, but for Zelia, it was 365 days of freedom and growth. Her divorce was officially finalized 6 months ago. The judge accepted all of Zelia's demands. Since Zelia's proof of ownership was so strong and clear, the division of assets was smooth. Tavarius, who tried to fight claiming a share of the company, only made a fool of himself in court. His lawyer couldn't prove even $1 of contribution from Tavarius, but Zilia's lawyer easily proved the hundreds of thousands of dollars Tavarius had siphoned from the company without contributing anything. Tavarius left the court as a totally defeated man. Freed from the burden of a toxic marriage, Zilia poured all her energy into two things: her business and her own happiness, and the results were amazing. The eco-friendly fashion line Tavarius saw on his phone was an international success. Her company grew exponentially. She opened 2 new factories and hired hundreds of employees. She hadn't just recovered, she was flying much higher than before. The Zilia of now was another person. She was still a soft-spoken woman, but now she had an aura of confidence and unshakable determination. She no longer hesitated when making decisions. She didn't try to please everyone. She had learned that her self-worth was not determined by the approval of others, especially not a man like Tavarius or a mother-in-law like Eudora. To celebrate the company's achievements and the first anniversary of her freedom, Zilia decided to organize an event, not a vanity-filled society party like Eudora wanted. She held an appreciation event in a much more meaningful place, a large community center and youth shelter in Atlanta that she had been supporting quietly. The center's hall was decorated simply but lively. There were no imported flowers or luxury catering costing thousands of dollars. Instead, there were colorful balloons, large cakes, and hundreds of delicious meal boxes ordered from a home catering business run by single mothers she sponsored. Her guests of honor weren't celebrities with gold bracelets, but orphans laughing happily and elderly people smiling sincerely. Zilia was sitting on the floor with the children, wearing a simple white dress that looked very elegant. She was feeding a small child and smiling widely when the child babbled. There was no burden on her face. There was only peace. "I am here," said Zilia, giving a brief speech not as a company director, but as a person who wants to share her gratitude. "The last year has taught me a lot, especially about letting go." She looked at the sincere faces in front of her. Sometimes the best thing we can do is let go. Release the burden, let go of the past, and let go of the people who sicken our soul, because only with empty hands can we receive new, more beautiful blessings. The event ended with a joint prayer. Zilia symbolically handed over a large donation for the complete remodeling of the shelter building. The staff and children cried with emotion and prayed endlessly for Zilia. Almost at the same time, in another corner of the dusty and hot city, there was a long line in front of a modest building with a sign that said, "Soup Kitchen, Friday Distribution." People in old clothes, tired faces, and empty gazes waited in silence with empty bowls or lunchboxes. In the middle of that line were 2 people who contrasted but were equally miserable. A thin, sickly-looking old woman leaned on a younger man wearing an old, twisted bandana. The man, dressed in a faded t-shirt, stared ahead with a lost look. They were Eudora and Tavarius. This was their new reality. After Tavarius lost the rental car for not paying the fee and lost his driving job, they were left completely broke. They lived on the compassion of neighbors and now survived by waiting in lines at soup kitchens. "Move up a bit, Tavarius. I'm hungry," complained Eudora. Her voice was weak, but it still held a brusque tone. "Patience, mother. The line is always long," replied Tavarius. There was no emotion in his voice. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't been so foolish back then—" "Mother," cut in Tavarius for the first time. He didn't interrupt her with anger, but with a deep weariness. "Enough. It's no use. Just wait in line. It's almost our turn." Eudora was surprised by Tavarius's tone of voice and closed her mouth. She looked at her son and looked at the line. Finally, she realized. There was no one left to blame, nor was there anything left. This was the end of everything. Back at the community center, the event had ended. Zilia walked alone through the beautiful garden, enjoying the soft sunset breeze. Her assistant approached. "Boss, the car is ready. The interview with the International Business magazine is scheduled for 5. Zilia nodded. She looked at the sunset sky starting to turn red. She felt peace. She had forgiven Tavarius and Eudora. Not for them, but for herself. She forgave to release the remaining toxins of the past. As she walked toward the car, a thought crossed her mind. She remembered the Xylia, who was once willing to sacrifice everything to buy a luxury house for her mother-in-law, just to be insulted. She smiled slightly. Once I was desperate to buy them a house, she thought, as she opened the door of her own car, since she didn't need a chauffeur. But in exchange, God gave me something much more expensive. God gave me a palace they can never seal. A palace called freedom. She got into the car, adjusted her scarf, and drove toward the future she had created herself. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.